Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going on a massive macro-historical journey that completely ditches the standard timeline you probably learned in school. We're not going to spend time on a mere succession of kings, the shifting of random borders, or the daily outcomes of old battles. Instead, we're looking at the grand unfolding epic of our species. We're going to examine the specific, scientifically grounded turning points, the actual nodes that irrevocably altered the trajectory of humanity and the planet we call home. To start, we have to ask ourselves, what really drives human history? It's a question that kind of challenges all our preconceived notions. If you take a step back and look at the universe, it's dictated by the inescapable laws of entropy, right? Everything naturally decays into disorder. Yet, against all odds, the human species represents this stunning anomaly. We are a literal engine of profound complexity. So, if it isn't just monarchs and military tactics moving us forward, what are the underlying forces actually propelling our survival and evolution? Well, the answer lies in three scientific forces. Our entire epic is really governed by biology and genetics, thermodynamics and energy, and information processing. We are constantly finding new ways to capture energy, reshape our environment, and encode information. Basically, every single major leap in our history can be traced back to a massive breakthrough in one of these three fundamental pillars. Our story truly kicks off around 74,000 years ago, during what you could call the crucible of ice and ash. The Toba supervolcano erupted, creating a severe evolutionary bottleneck. We're talking about a global human population that may have plummeted to merely a few thousand breeding pairs. But from that ultimate survival test came the cognitive revolution. Driven by genetic mutations, specifically the development of the FOXP2 gene, we gained fine motor control of the larynx and mouth. We literally transitioned from basic alarm calls to complex syntactical language. This was our first massive leap in information processing. We could suddenly share abstract concepts, gossip, weave fictions, and actually organize in really large numbers. And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate Faustian bargain. Enter the agricultural revolution, around 12,000 years ago. For hundreds of thousands of years, we were completely nomadic. Then we began manipulating flora and fauna. While we gained a massive caloric surplus and our populations absolutely exploded, we suffered from a way less diverse diet, resulting in malnutrition and tooth decay. Plus, living in such close quarters with animals introduced a whole host of new zoonotic pathogens into human history. We really like to flatter ourselves and say we domesticated wheat, but biologically speaking, wheat domesticated us. It literally commanded us to clear forests and break our backs pulling weeds. Now, this agricultural surplus created a hard biological limit. With immense food supply came massive populations. By 3200 BCE, the city of Uruk in Mesopotamia housed tens of thousands of people. The human brain, specifically the hippocampus, is amazing at remembering botanical knowledge and complex social hierarchies. But let's be real, it simply cannot memorize the tax tributes, grain yields, and debt records of 50,000 citizens. We had officially hit a biological wall in our information processing. To solve this, the Sumerians invented a revolutionary technology, writing, specifically cuneiform. This wasn't just some fun cultural milestone. It was humanity's very first externalized hard drive. By pressing a reed stylus into wet clay, we literally decoupled memory from the fragile confines of the brain. Knowledge could now outlive the individual. And because of this systemic leap in data storage, the highly abstract concept of the bureaucratic state was born, complete with taxes, monumental architecture, and organized religion. But as we know, complex systems are inherently vulnerable. By the 2nd millennium BCE, the Mediterranean world was a dazzlingly interconnected, globalized economy, completely reliant on bronze, an alloy demanding supply chains stretching thousands of miles. Then, around 1177 BCE, the Late Bronze Age collapsed, wiped it all out. It was a perfect storm, cascading in 3 brutal steps. Step 1, severe multi-decadal megadroughts and a swarm of earthquakes battered the region. Step 2, this sparked absolute famine and the mass migration of displaced marauders known as the Sea Peoples. Step 3, those fragile maritime supply chains were completely destroyed. Without tin, no bronze could be forged. The incredibly complex, centralized states literally collapsed under their own weight. Slowly, humanity recovered, adopted iron, and population density surged again, leading us straight into the axial age. This was a massive shift in the thermodynamics of human societies. The invention of coinage created a new merchant class and a tremendous economic surplus. This surplus meant that, for the very first time,
Societies didn't need absolutely everyone laboring out in the fields. It provided the time and wealth to support a totally new class of philosophers. Figures like Socrates, the Buddha, and Confucius emerged completely independent of one another across Eurasia, focusing intensely on the awakening of the human mind and universalist ideologies. But as philosophies consolidated, so did empires, like the Han Dynasty and the Roman Empire, deeply connected by the sprawling Silk Road. And that brings us to a truly staggering number: 5 million. That is the estimated number of lives claimed by the Antonine Plague in the 2nd century CE. Roman legions brought back an invisible enemy, likely smallpox or measles, across those very same trade networks. It killed roughly 10% of the entire Roman population, devastated their army, and completely cratered the economy. It is a harsh reminder that no matter how grand an empire is, it is always entirely subservient to the blind forces of microbiology. And if the Antonine Plague was a tremor, the Black Death of the 14th century was a catastrophic biological earthquake. Let's methodically walk through the brutal mechanics of how this happened. Step 1. The Yersinia pestis bacterium infects a flea, rapidly multiplying until it forms a solid biofilm block right in the flea's gut. Step 2. Frantic and starving, the flea bites any warm-blooded host it can find, regurgitating that deadly bacteria straight into the victim's bloodstream. Step 3. The Mongol Empire's unified Eurasian trading zone unwittingly acts as a superhighway, carrying these highly infected fleas on the backs of black rats right into the bustling, thoroughly unprepared ports of Europe. The devastation was completely incomprehensible. Just think about this. Between 30 and 50% of Europe's entire population was wiped out in just 4 years. Globally, the Black Death killed anywhere from 75 to 200 million people. This was a biological event so incredibly severe that it permanently altered both the socioeconomic and genetic trajectory of the surviving populations in Europe and Asia.
So the crucial point is how this immense death acted as a profoundly ironic, macabre reset. Because the population was completely decimated, the land remained, but labor became incredibly scarce. Suddenly, the surviving peasants had immense economic leverage. This demographic collapse cracked the oppressive system of feudalism wide open, drove up wages, and caused wealth per capita to absolutely skyrocket. This newly concentrated wealth inadvertently went on to fund the patronages of the Italian Renaissance, fundamentally pivoting culture toward humanism, art, and scientific inquiry. Soon after, our mastery of global navigation led to the Great Collision in 1492. Christopher Columbus violently stitched the Earth's separated biospheres back together in what we call the Columbian Exchange. But the exchange was wildly, tragically asymmetrical. The Old World brought a biological payload of smallpox, measles, and typhus, resulting in a terrifying 90% population collapse among indigenous peoples who had absolutely zero immunological resistance. Conversely, the New World sent back potatoes and maize, agricultural miracles that fueled an unprecedented population boom back in Europe and Asia. That very population boom in Europe set the stage for another profound thermodynamic crisis. By the 18th century, Britain had chopped down most of its forests. So how did a simple timber shortage completely rewrite the human experience? Facing this massive energy deficit, humanity had to literally dig underground for ancient, concentrated solar energy. We found coal. To mine that coal, we had to pump water out of deep shafts, leading James Watt to perfect the steam engine. For all of human history up to this point, we were bound by strict biological limits, reliant on human or animal muscles, or the unpredictable forces of wind and water. But the steam engine gave us a mechanical, Promethean leap. We learned to convert thermal energy into kinetic energy. This sparked the Industrial Revolution. We shifted from an agrarian species dictated by the sun to an urbanized species governed by the clock, all while unknowingly beginning to pump millions of years' worth of sequestered carbon right up into the sky. The terrifying climax of this industrialization arrived in the 20th century with the World Wars. Amidst the mechanized slaughter, utter necessity drove breathtaking scientific advancement, culminating in the Manhattan Project. We unlocked the atom. For the very first time in the 4.5 billion year history of Earth, a single biological species possessed the power to cause its own immediate extinction. This immense power officially inaugurated the Anthropocene, a completely new geologic epoch where human activity dictates the environment, leaving a permanent footprint of radioisotopes, carbon, and microplastics deep in the Earth's crust. Let's move to the information age and see how this builds, because the pace here is absolutely wild.
If the 19th century was about mastering energy, the late 20th century was entirely about mastering information. Following World War II, the transistor was invented, replacing bulky vacuum tubes. By 1969, computers were linked via AirBanet. The 1990s gave us the World Wide Web, weaving this massive global digital nervous system. And by 2003, we successfully mapped the human genome, the 3.2 billion base pairs that write the actual biological software of human life.
We are moving at lightning speed right now. Our cognitive journey, which started with a grunted warning on the savannah, has exploded into this. We have billions of silicon transistors etched with binary code. We have CRISPR-Cas9 giving us the unbelievable power to directly edit our own human DNA and take the reins of our own evolution. And we have birthed artificial intelligence, with deep neural networks processing exabytes of data in the cloud, recognizing patterns and solving problems at a scale that rivals and sometimes completely exceeds human capability. Looking back across this whole tapestry of time, the trajectory is just one of relentless acceleration. From barely surviving the volcanic ash of Toba to enduring the demographic horrors of the Black Death, all the way to splitting the atom and decoding DNA, we carry the legacy of 300,000 years of survival. We truly have transitioned from a species at the mercy of its environment to a species that dictates the absolute fate of the biosphere. We are a species of infinite adaptability, standing right on the horizon of the future, preparing to return to the moon and step onto Mars. The entire arc of our history proves our capability, but it leaves us with this final, incredibly vital question. We've mastered the physical world, we've mastered energy, and we are mastering information. But do we have the wisdom to master ourselves? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this leaves you looking at the history of humanity in a completely new light.
Please like and subscribe.